There is blind justice, and then there is trading justice, so that you can finally afford to get that laser eye surgery. Not only will people find you more attractive once you ditch those old glasses, you'll be able to see your charts better. That's what we call win-win. Speaking of winning, it's time for a little trading justice, brought to you by TackleTrading.com.
Welcome out to the Trading Justice podcast. My name is Matt Justice, along with my co-host Tim Justice. Tim, how are you today, brother?
Doing great. I have that feeling that you get when you get on an old, kind of creaky, amusement park ride, that you're worried that it might break down on you. Like it seems like the technology around our podcast is diminishing each and every time we get together. So I'm hoping we make it through this one, Matt.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I did not do one thing different. I plugged it in. The podcast didn't work last night. I plugged it in today. It didn't work. And all of a sudden it works. I did nothing different. So, hopefully it does last, and hopefully we get through this one, and we're going to have a great time. We have a special guest out there today. Tim, you want to introduce him?
Well, I do. He's been on the podcast before. He's a good friend of mine, old student. That
friend
also
of ours,
means that he is old. Yeah. Steve Huang. Steve, great to have you, my man.
Steve, I got to tell you, and I told you this last night, so it's not going to be a shocker to you at all. But Steve, you are the number one guest on the Trading Justice podcast. How do you feel about that?
Boy, what an honor! I don't know what it was, but it's so cool to hear that.
I honestly, Tim, what would you attest it to? What do you think Steve's podcast? And for those of you who have not listened to Steve's first podcast, it was episode 19 of the Trading Justice podcast. But Tim, why do you think Steve's first podcast was the most highly rated podcast we've ever had?
I'll grab the stick here and take control of the whole thing. I'll tell you, I believe it's that people register with the story. Mm-hmm. Here Steve is. He's a Hall of Fame student at Rich Dad Education, and somebody that I've worked with for years, somebody who is smart and bright and good looking and all those kind of things, Steve. But it's really, he struggled
at first. I like the good-looking part. That was well played there.
Yeah, he's a handsome boy.
Yeah,
Don't worry about
handsome.
that.
He is. Yes.
But he struggled at first. When he started trading, it didn't all click right away, and then he worked hard, he got better. And I think all of us, we have this thing where we connect with people that have gone through what we're going through right now. So if you're a listener out there, and this is the first year you've ever traded, and maybe you've had some success and some failure and some challenges and some victories, you probably are looking for a role model. Steve, you are that role model, whether you like it or not.
I'm glad you put it like that, Tim, because, I keep thinking, like, everybody thinks that you have to be this wizard, this trading genius, the smartest man in the world to be able to trade. And Steve, you first started trading and whatnot. You struggled a little bit. Talk about your struggles when you first started.
Boy, it was pretty tough. Well, let me just say I agree with Tim that maybe the good looks contributed to the podcast downloads.
It has to. I'll tell you, the first time I saw Tim, we've talked on the phone many, many, many times. We've emailed many times, but Steve came out to my event there in Anaheim. You remember that, Steve?
I do.
And Steve walks in, and literally, you know how there's those times you see somebody and you just instantly know them, even though you haven't talked to them ever, like in person. Steve walks into my room, and I literally stop the entire event. And I bring Steve. I'm like, Steve, get over here. And Steve gets, takes his hand out to shake my hand, and I just give him this big bear hug. It's just, it was awesome. I can't wait till I'm out in LA again, Steve.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. If you want me to come out again, I'm more than happy to come out and talk to people. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, your story's amazing. But let's get back to kind of your early trading career. When you first started trading back in 2010, 2011, talk about your struggles that you had in terms of understanding different concepts.
So when I first started out, it was tough because I only knew the naked put. Mm-hmm. And I knew what a call was, I knew what puts were, but I didn't really focus on the other strategies, and I just loved the naked put. And I never fully, truly understood the type of risk that's involved when 100% of your account is only you're only doing naked puts on your entire account. So the delta is very, very high. Even though the theta is great, you're really exposed to a hard move down. And at the same time, I didn't really understand position sizing, risk management, and things like that. So when something ran against me, my losses were really big, really quickly. And at the time, I didn't even know what I was doing wrong. I just knew I was taking losses. There was something I was doing wrong, and I just didn't know how to actually fix it. And I kept running up into that problem over and over and over again. And it was just really incredibly frustrating, especially when I didn't know how to fix it. Well, I think of it in terms of probability of success. So it's a general estimate as to how likely your trade is going to work out. So if you've got for example, like a 20 delta trade on, that means that you have an 80% likelihood of that trade working out, meaning that the option is most likely going to expire worthless. And then there's a 20% chance that it won't work out for you.
You know, options are an interesting animal, and for a lot of people out there, they've probably never even traded options. And so when we're talking naked put, covered call, delta, this and that, I think the three of us have to remember we've been doing this for a long time. You know, so if you can ever simplify something for a new student, new trader, new somebody at anything, do that. So let's start from the beginning, even before that, Steve. Why did you choose to get into an options business to begin with? Why not some other business? Why not start a hot dog stand and go down to the beach and try to sell hot dogs? You know, why options?
Yeah, so I got into it just because I was fascinated by how you can control your risk. So the story is this, is my girlfriend, who is now wife, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, had seen an ad for the stock classes. And so she went to it, she thought it was interesting, and she paid the money to go to the 3-day stock success class. And she asked me if I'd be interested. I didn't really see it as much value. I thought it was just, you know, I was pretty arrogant back then. I thought I had a very good knowledge of stocks. You know, I had gone to law school, graduated from law school, cum laude. I went to business school. I was on the dean's list there. So I thought I knew stock market pretty well, even though I really had no idea what I was doing. And so I went into the class thinking, all right, this is kind of cute. I'll support my girlfriend. I'll go with her and we'll hang out for 3 days and maybe I'll learn something. So I went in there, and it immediately, within the first day, my mind was blown away. I had no idea that you can make money in so many different ways, no matter how the stock market moves. I saw it as a matter of controlling your risk, whereas before I would just buy a stock, and if it happened to go up, I would make money. If it went down, I lost money. If it didn't go anywhere, I'd just tread water. So the concept of being able to make money in any market condition is what really, really opened my eyes, and it just opened up a passion within me. And we decided to go ahead and pay for the classes and learn.
So you caught the bug. You caught the bug early on, and you said, this is a bunch of cool stuff, and I need to know about it. I need to learn. I need more knowledge. I need more information. I've been successful at everything I've ever done in terms of accolades and grades and everything. And by the way, I failed art history 5 times, so I was never cum laude anything. So
that just means Steve's smarter than you, Tim.
That's right.
That's all it means.
You knew that if you put your mind to it, you could do it. And so you went about and you took the advice of the classes and the books and you started building a business, but it still didn't work for you quite yet, did it?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah. So what was it that you think, knowing what you know now, looking back, at the time, what was holding you back?
So there are different points in my career, and I feel like I can think of 3 definitive points throughout my career where things had an enormous impact on me. And that first year was, I had no idea how to position size. or manage the risk within my account. And I was taking positions on, again, 22, 23 delta trades.
Okay, now, and I don't mean to cut you off because,
Yeah.
you know, I could listen to you all day. But when you say something that is that important, I want to slow down. I want to make sure people get it. Position sizing. To us as traders, we know what that is. Explain that to everybody.
So what I was doing was I was taking trades on, and if you've got a trade with you have about an 80% chance of success, those are not bad odds. Those are pretty good odds. You're going to win 80% of the time, you lose 20% of the time. The odds are significantly in your favor. The problem is what happens when it goes wrong. And when your position size is fairly small, you'll take a loss, but it won't be a devastating loss to your account unless you're completely asleep at the wheel and it ends up running really, really enormously hard against you. So the problem with me was rather than taking a fairly small position, I was taking fairly large positions in my account. My account wasn't that big at the time, and so these trades, I don't remember exactly, but I would not be surprised if one trade took up 30, 35% of my account, and which is a lot.
Right, and these are positions that you put on and you're not necessarily there to manage the risk or hedge it or deal with it. And so you're putting the car on cruise control, but then you're taking the hands off the wheel. And so that could be a problem when you're new. You experienced some of the volatility, you dealt with it, you had to learn how to change your approach. And position sizing was part of that. So let's fast forward past that. At what point in your trading did you start to take the basic rules that you learned from class and tweaking them and changing them and making them your own?
That was probably after the first or second day of our mentorship, Tim. So about 10 or 11 months into trading, I realized I couldn't go any further based upon what I knew. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I had to get professional help, and I called Tigran, which is now Rich Dad. I called Tigran up and said, hey, I want to schedule my mentorship, and decided to go and do my mentorship with you. And during that first day, you were showing me what a system looks like. And you gave me certain rules by which you follow with your own trading system. And I remember going home and going back to the hotel and thinking to myself, well, how does this work? And I started chewing it over. And I came back the next day and I said, hey, Tim, I realized this rule that you gave me. This is a good rule, but ultimately it's up to the trader to decide what percentage they want to allocate of their account to each trade. And that's when you validate it. You're like, yeah, you would decide this and that. The general principle is you want to keep it small, but at the same time, it's up to you. Do you want to allocate no more than 3% per trade or 5% or 6%? That's up to you to determine. So right there, I realized there was some flexibility, and you don't necessarily what is the word for it? You've got to apply your own judgment to these rules and also adapt to the market conditions as well.
Well, it's all a journey. It's a process and there's a learning curve to each person individually. And I kind of equate it to learning how to cook. I've said this a lot. I've used this analogy a lot. When I was a kid, Steve, we grew up in a Mormon household, church on Sunday, home, after school, and mom and dad were still working, 7 kids. I would get home from school and I would be the only one there. Me and my little brother, he would show up with me, and we were hungry. So, what I'd do is I'd pull out the Ward cookbook and I'd thumb through the recipes, and I'd find something I want to cook that we had the stuff for, and I would try to follow. Okay, you guys are listening to the Trading Justice podcast with our special guest, Steve Huang, Matt Justice, my co-host, and this is Tim Justice, speaking to you from my garage today, Steve. I've got my laptop and everything set up in the garage. We were just talking. We had some audio interference, but now we're back. I want to continue the conversation. I was talking about your journey, and you just told me about how, as a new trader, at some point you had to start to make it your own. And as a mentor and somebody, and I say this, I've lived the life of 1,000 traders, probably 10,000 traders, because as a teacher, I get to bring you guys into my office and I get to help you build a business. Every individual is unique. They have their own perspectives, their own life experiences, their own skill sets, their own emotions. And so I get to watch them trade. And so I know one of the keys to success is to make your business yours. And you did that. Now, I was given an analogy about this. When I was a kid, I learned how to cook from a young age. You know, grew up in a Mormon household, and when I got home from school, nobody was there. My mom was running a business. My dad was running a business. We lived with people who were independent and business owners and out there in the community and doing stuff, and I had to cook. And when I was a kid, I'd pull out a recipe book and I'd follow it step by step by step by step. 25 years later, I don't need to do that. You know, I'm a confident enough cook that if you put me in a kitchen and you open the pantry door and you said, make me a meal, I could do it, and it would be delicious. You know, and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a master chef, but I've made my own approach mine. And you did that as well with your trading. I think that's pretty impressive. What advice can you give new traders out there about when they should start to deviate from their rules and how they should go about that whole process?
Well, I think what you talked about is exactly right, Tim. It's first thing is to get an understanding of the strategy and understand what do you do if the stock. Just think of every single direction the stock is going to move. So it's either going to go up, down, or sideways, and then have a plan for no matter what's going to happen. Once you have that plan and you get to the point where every time you see you want to enter in the trade, you automatically know that. At that point, that's where your personality, in my opinion, this is where your personality comes into play. Some people are just inherently more susceptible, or not susceptible, they tend to embrace risk more than others, whereas others tend to be more conservative. Yeah. For me, in my past, I tend to be more conservative. So I've gone through situations where my best friend came to me with a great business idea. I loan him money, and then $200,000 later, my best friend suddenly disappears and doesn't return my phone calls.
This is a big deal right here. This is actually a really big deal. And I think anybody who's listening to this podcast right now, I want you to stop and pause and think about yourself. Steve, I once had a student in my office who had just gotten back from a war zone. And she was a soldier. And you know, she had gone into conflict and seen bullets and death and everything you can imagine. And there she is sitting in my office, and I'm trying to tell her to be more conservative with her money. And you can probably guess she didn't really have that mindset.
Yeah.
And so she just wasn't ready to do anything conservatively, and so she ended up over leveraging. There was one time, and this is way before I mentored her, the very first time I ever talked to her, she had like a $300,000 or $400,000 account, and she calls me, she says, hey, what do you think about Apple? And I kind of got caught off guard and said, what do you mean? And she says, well, I've got 100 call options on Apple, and I want to know if you think it'll go up today. Ooh. Ooh. Like, are you shitting me? I have no idea if it'll go up today.
Tim.
Yeah. And every once in a blue moon, I get a call from a good person with good intentions who just doesn't have the right mindset and doesn't understand risk control. And really, at the end of the day, Steve, they're gambling. Yeah. And so it's an interesting perspective, and I think one that we can all step back from and make sure that we understand, okay, where am I in my life? And am I ready to treat this like a business? From day one, you always wanted a business. I don't think that was ever a problem with you. In fact, you're very thorough. You research it. You make sure you've got your rules. And you built it. But you've also seen this at times, I'm sure, when you're trading. Every now and then we can get over leveraged, right?
Oh, yeah.
What do you do when you catch yourself in a position that you know is too much risk?
At that point, then I got to think about, first thing I ask myself is, do I have enough capital left in my account to hedge if something goes against me? if I don't have enough capital in my account, then I know I got to reduce my position size immediately, or I have to watch it really, really carefully and be willing to take a loss if it runs against me. But those are the first thoughts that come into my mind. But the key there, Tim, is what you were saying is when you know you're over leveraged. I think a lot of times it's you're in the trade, especially me as a day trader. When you see that move coming and you're into it, it's kind of like almost like a shark swimming in water is getting ready to pounce. And once you've pounced, the frenzy comes and you start building your position and going into it. And to me, it seems like sometimes you can get lost in that moment and you don't realize you're over leveraged. So the big thing is just number one, even being able to realize you're over leveraged to begin with,
Yeah. And this is where, I was tweeting today about mistakes that new traders make. And I was saying one of the first things that new traders do that they should avoid is they go into live before they demo it. You and I and Matt, we're sitting here, we're talking. We know when there's too much risk because we've been there and we've done that and we've seen it and we've experienced it. So when you see a big fat delta on your account and the volatility's picking up intraday, we know how to deal with it. A new trader, they need to practice first. If you're out there and you're listening to the podcast, the most important thing that you've done and the decision you've made is simply just to move forward and to build a business. You don't have to go throw all of your money at the market and hope it works out. Treat it responsibly. Treat it like a business. Steve, I'm starting a new business with one of my friends, which I know sounds a little bit scary to begin with, but we're going to start a retail store, and we're in the development and just the idea phase right now. We didn't go out and rent the retail space on day one. We got to put together a business plan. We've got to check margins. We got to come up with a contract and an operating agreement. And our target open date is April 15th, tax day. And it's like any new business you start. If you start a trading business today and you're brand new, you shouldn't go out there in the live market and trade. Let's kind of change gears for a second here, and let's back it up a little bit. I'm loving this conversation. I'm loving everything about it, and we could talk for hours, but I do want to get down to some simple stuff as well. On a given day, what time do you wake up? Where do you live? What is a day like? Yeah,
that's a great question. So I live in Los Angeles, so we're on Pacific Coast time. What I do is I'm usually up by 6 a.m. And at that point, I'm checking the futures. I want to see whether they're telling me something about where the market's going. And I get a general feel. My whole point at that point is to develop an opinion as to where I think the market's going to go. It doesn't matter if my opinion is right or wrong. I just want to have some sort of an opinion. And then when the market opens at 6:30, that's when I'm starting to watch it really, really closely. Now, nowadays, I'm more of a swing trader now, just because my wife and I recently had a son, and you have the challenges of taking care of the baby and things like that. And I never want to be in a position where the baby's crying and I'm in the middle of a trade. So I've switched to being more of a swing trader, but at heart, I'm 100% a day trader. Mm-hmm. So when I'm day trading, what I typically do is I let the first few minutes go by, probably like the first 10, maybe 15 minutes go by for the volatility to work itself out. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a feel for where the market's going. And I'm looking at all sorts of things. I'm not only looking at the specific ticker that I'm looking to trade, but I'm looking at the SPY, the Qs. If the ticker that I'm trading is a big percentage of the Qs, of the NASDAQ, but not of the SPY, then I'm focusing more on the NASDAQ. Wait.
I love all this. I'm obviously following it, but I'm just thinking of our audience here. So the first 10 minutes, you avoid that period. Let's dive into why on that. Okay, the market opens, you hear ding, 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 and the market's open, and here's the action. The curtain comes up and the price starts moving. What's pushing the price at that point, and why are you avoiding it?
So what's happening at that point is there are a good number of there's a bunch of different factors that are causing the price to move at that point, but you have all sorts of orders that were entered before the market opened, maybe for the night before or whatnot, that are still outstanding there, and the market makers are trying to fill them as quickly as possible. And so you're seeing the price move in a very volatile fashion depending on how those orders are filled. Also, you'll see the volume to be fairly high right from the get-go. And so
Right.
also, at the same time, you have traders that are digesting the news that came out the night before or even that morning before the market opened. So they're jumping in, trying to make certain trades or do certain things. And so when there's that much frenzy going on, it's really difficult for me personally to be able to tell where the market is going at that point, because it could very well shoot up and then come crashing down right away, only to shoot up again.
I've never used this analogy before, so you boys are going to have to tell me if it works. But it's kind of like a fishing boat that pulls up that big catch, that big net of like 1,000 fish in it. And the moment when they drop it on the deck, that's like the market open. Fish are flopping everywhere. Things are crazy. You can't really get a hold of it. You kind of have to wait for things to settle down. Then you go in and you start sorting, right? The opening bell is just random and everywhere. Matt, you like that one?
No, that doesn't work. No. It was a good attempt. It was good. I'll give you credit for it, but no, I wasn't following on that one.
Steve, it wouldn't have mattered what I said. Matt would have said it doesn't work.
That's not true. That is not true. Maybe,
I could have
maybe
used an analogy that he used last week, word for word. He would have been like, that doesn't work.
Tim, I'm going to use your analogy tomorrow.
Honestly, out there, if you're a teacher, teach with stories.
You have to.
Because Matt and I, we're traders, but we're teachers as well. We get up in front of people. We speak. We give classes online.
Well,
people really connect with stories, and always be yourself. I mean, use stories from your life and things you do. I think people really connect with that, Matt.
There's people learn different ways, and honestly, when I start getting into the detail of teaching somebody who is very, very new to the market, how to trade and what a bullish retracement is, what a breakout is, all that, it just gets overwhelming at first. But then when I tell it in a story, they're like, oh yeah, I get that. So no, stories are awesome.
By the way, we're not going to dive into this too much today, but I will tease the audience a little bit. The next thing I'm mentoring Steve on is how to be a stock mentor. And he might be on Tackle Trading soon, giving some webinars. If you guys are interested in that,
Steve, we're excited,
let us
buddy.
know.
We're excited.
Yeah.
That'll be a lot of fun.
I'll tell you I've had many conversations with Steve over the years, and Steve, there was a conversation that we were having just about a month and a half ago about it was just me, you, and Tim on the phone, and you said, I kind of have a desire to teach people. And over all the conversations I've ever had with you, that was the one that stood out to me more than anything else. Because to me, the art, to teach people how to trade, teach people how to control, it's as important as anything else. We have a responsibility, and this is what Robert Kiyosaki taught me. We have a responsibility to give people hope, to give people a chance. Because Wall Street government is not going to do it.
Yeah. Matt, that's interesting you say that. I had a kid from London today. I was teaching a Forex class. I was telling Steve about it before we started. And he asked me a question, which I get a lot as a mentor. He says, Tim, I want to make $2,000 a week. Is that a reasonable goal? And my response was, let somebody else tell you can't do something. That's not my job.
Yeah.
That
is a great answer. I swear to God, that might be the best answer I've ever heard. Because most people say, how much money do you have?
Right.
That's and honestly, Tim, before you even said that, that's what I thought. I was like, well, $2,000 a month, $2,000 a week. How much money do you have? I just automatically went to
Start to do the numbers.
Yeah,
start to be a human calculator.
Exactly.
Your brain starts to think, well, if you compound interest and you make covered calls, or if you can day trade every day and pick up 50. No. I mean, at a beginning stage of somebody's career, the last thing you ever want to do is tell them they can't do something.
Well, first of all, you should never, ever, ever say somebody can't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not how we should be. We should be ambitious. We should be reaching for the stars. We should set those goals very, 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 very high. And so I like your response. That's a really good response.
You like that better than the fish on the deck story?
The fish on the deck didn't work, but the other one did, yes.
Oh, sometimes I feel like a guy who tried stand-up comedy one time, Steve, and then gets back into the back room, and his friends just make fun of him for an hour.
Well, you gotta have friends like that. Come on.
Really? That's the joke you're going with?
Do you really?
Big shot? You screw that up?
Do you really want me just to let you go out there and say that analogy to everybody? That's not who I am. Come on.
Oh, good.
I gotta help you out. Continue.
Listen, I'm self-deprecating enough to let you guys make fun of me for the next hour, but we're not going to do it. We're going to focus on what we're talking about here, and I think there's been a really powerful message so far. You know, you got to start out with a dream. You got to be willing to work. You have to be willing to work through failure and challenges, and just continue to push.
Honestly, Tim, the thing that is standing out, and I'm just kind of sitting back, just letting you guys talk, but the thing that stands out to me is the fact that, Steve, you came from a very, very, very educated background. I mean, we're talking MBAs and business degrees and law degrees and 10 years of education, traditional education, and you came into that first class and you thought you knew something, and instantly you were willing to, and I think this is very important. You were willing to accept that you didn't know something. You were willing to accept that you didn't know everything, and that you were willing to adapt it, your principles and whatnot. And I think that's very powerful to be able to say that.
Well, the instructors are really good, and I'll tell you something, Tim. I never even told this to you before, and when Matt and I were chatting last night, I don't know why it finally came up, but one thing a lot of people don't know about me is I actually had a learning disability when I was younger. And so the way I study and the way I learn is very different from other people.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and so the education was there certainly, but I think the manner in which I learn, I tend to learn more slowly than other people. And
so wait, what is is it diagnosed? Is there an official?
No, I'll tell you guys what happened. So when I was younger, in junior high school and things, I could just read things and I could learn them almost immediately. It was very easy, and memorization, I rarely ever remembering sitting down and trying to memorize something. It was just in high school and in junior high, if I read something, I generally would remember it later on. I didn't have a photographic memory, but I caught on really quickly.
Picked up on stuff, okay.
Yeah, and then my freshman year in college, me and a couple buddies were playing tennis, and one of my friends hit a ball to my right, and I dove for it. And in high school, I was a goalie in soccer, so I'm used to diving, and when I dive, I automatically roll out of it. And I dove, hit the ball back, and I tried to dive. I instinctively tried to roll out of it, forgetting that I had a tennis racket in my hand. So the tennis racket hit the ground. I lost my balance and I actually landed on my head. I got sent to the hospital, and they diagnosed me with a severe concussion, and I couldn't talk for about a day. And then for the next 6 months afterwards, I couldn't control my my number twos when I had to go to the bathroom. It would just come out immediately. And it was something I struggled with. At the same time, when I tried to read and study, I couldn't digest the information anymore. If I read for about just a couple of minutes, I would get a really bad headache, and my mind couldn't focus. So I was so young, I didn't know to go to a doctor back then, and frankly, I was really embarrassed too. And so I never sought medical help. But what I did was I would force myself to study really intensely for 1 minute and then take a break. And then the next day, or then I would try to come back and push it to 2 minutes, to 3 minutes, to 4. And then progressively over a long time, I was finally able to get it up to an hour or 2 hours, 3 hours, stuff like that. And so even today when I learn, when I'm in a classroom, or Tim, even when you were mentoring me, whatever you say, I try to write it down verbatim, and then I go back to my desk and when I'm alone, and that's where I really do my learning. I go back and reread the notes, and I have to digest and tear everything apart at that time.
You know, it's really interesting you're talking about this. I don't know if you know this. Matt also had a learning disability growing up.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's called the Emory County School System.
I was going to say, really? I was wondering. You know what? I still live in Emory County, so I have to deal with that.
I find this fascinating, Steve, because it's amazing to me. You know me, you've seen me, you know how handsome I am, how striking, and how I can carry a room. But you know, as a kid, I mean, I was born with a cleft lip and palate, and when I was a little kid, I was very self-conscious about it, and I thought everybody was always just staring at me, you know, because I have this scar on my face that I can see, and I see it every time I look in the mirror and every time I think about myself.
Handsome.
Say what, Matt?
It was because you were handsome.
I am handsome.
Yeah.
But, you know, as an adult, I don't think about it at all. I never picked up on what you're talking about, not one time. I wonder if, you know, those of us who've dealt with issues, whether they're perceived or real or whatever it is, how much of it we internalize and we hide from the outside world. You know, it's a very interesting conversation you're bringing up. So this learning disability, it makes you need to write everything out because you don't remember stuff as well? Is that kind of what I'm picking up on?
That, and also my brain, most people, what they can do is, like, let's say if it's a new concept and somebody's teaching to them, they can sit, listen, take notes at the same time, and also process the information. For me, I can do that with topics that I'm more familiar with, but if it's a new topic, it's really difficult for me to do that with. So instead, what I do, I literally have to shut my brain off, and I just sit there, and I'm like a transcriber. So whatever you say, I just write down, and I've gotten to the point where I could write really fast, but I'm not really thinking. I'm just writing down what you're saying, and then later on, when I can be by myself, I go back and I really read through it, and it takes me a long time, and then that's where the real learning begins. And then I'll come back the next day with questions and things like that.
I find that incredible that I've known you for 5 years now. I had no idea. I just thought you were a meticulous note taker, to be honest, you know.
No. You know, I don't even really – it's strange for me to say it's a learning disability because I've had it for so long that I don't – it's just like part of my life. Like I wear eyeglasses. You know, I just wear eyeglasses. So it's not something I really think about all that often.
Well, you know, I think there are a lot of people. I've taught enough people in my life and just my own idiosyncrasies and the challenges I have. I know that a lot of people have their own way of learning, you know, whether it's taking a lot of notes or they got to do it person to person. Some people are better in person. Some people are better watching videos and coming back in. I mean, everybody knows the way they're going to absorb the content. But I think it reinforced that you can't make things too complicated. Whether, you know, it doesn't matter where you come from, what background you come from, how quick you pick stuff up. I mean, it's better to keep it simple. You know, here you are, you're building a business, you're magna cum laude coming out of business school and USC and the whole thing, law school, and yet you're still dealing with challenges, but that didn't stop you 1 second. You know?
No, not at all.
You probably don't even think about it most of the time.
No, I don't. It's just part of me. And like some people, when they talk with an accent. For me, when I learn, that's the way I learn. But that's what makes me so passionate about trading. I think to myself all the time that anyone can learn this. Anyone can learn. A high schooler, high school dropout, college professor, anyone can learn this because I know I learned it. And if I learned it, anyone can learn it.
Oh, I agree.
There's no
100%.
reason why.
I mean, I've seen it so many times. Probably the smartest student I ever had came into my office. It was back when I was working downtown Salt Lake City in the Union Pacific building. And you remember coming to, we had 2 mentorships, and mentoring is not that big a deal. I mean, we could do it from the library, to be honest. It's more about connecting 2 people than it is where you're at. But we were in my old fancy office when I had it, and he showed up to my office, and I'd known him for 6 months or so. Brightest student I've ever had. No offense, Steve. He showed up, and he was brilliant with math. I mean, he had like an advanced degree in math. I can't remember if it was a master's or a PhD or something. He knew numbers, probability, all of that. But he was an emotional wreck. When I first met him, I thought this guy's going to be amazing. He's going to be a Hall of Fame, straight to the Hall of Fame. As I got to know him, when something went bad for 10 minutes, his heart started to race. Like bad gambler, Yeah. It's like when you got 2 kings in your hand, pre-hold'em, and they're dealing out the cards, and some guy pushes you all in. And you're just thinking, well, I know I probably am going to win, but I got the bad odds. And then your gambling instincts take over, and maybe you even fold because you got pushed around. I used to play a lot of poker, and I've seen that bad gambler mindset, in their face, their body language, the whole thing. Sometimes even somebody with all the skills in the world, they don't necessarily make it work. And yet, like what you were just saying, I've seen examples of students that I've brought through and taught how to trade that come from just very, very unique backgrounds and maybe don't have what somebody would say would be a trader's mindset, but yet they found a way to make it work. I taught a guy, he was about 80 years old. He was from Phoenix, Arizona one time. And all I did, Steve, because when he got in my office, he said, listen, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, but at 2 o'clock, we're going golfing. And I said, okay. I know some courses. He said, listen, I'm here to learn. That's the priority. But I'm 80 years old, and I play golf, and I can't do this for 8 hours. So do whatever you got to do. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. But at 2 o'clock, we got to go golfing. And we did. We played 3 different golf courses while we were talking about markets and all that stuff. But so what do you think what would you do if you have an 80-year-old man who comes from a contractor's background, and he wants to learn how to do something with his money, and he really doesn't have the ambition to be there all day? What would you teach him?
Well, he's definitely not a day trader.
Nope.
So he's definitely a swing trader. But I think that's where the mentor skills really come in.
Yep.
Because you can't just take that's one thing I really appreciate about you, Tim. Before you and I mentored, I actually interviewed you on the phone, same with other mentors. Mm-hmm. And I chose you because I felt like you were really listening to my problems and you were trying to craft a solution based upon what I was dealing with and the challenges I was facing. And I think that's where the skill of the mentor comes in. If an 80-year-old person comes in and he wants to go golfing at 2 o'clock every day, that's where your flexibility as a mentor comes in, where you think, how am I going to teach this gentleman in a way that makes it stick? And it's not an easy thing to do because every person learns differently, and you've got to be able to adapt.
Yeah, and you know what we did, Steve, is I built his entire system around preserving capital. Obviously, he doesn't need to grow it too much. And we worked on capital preservation through naked puts, but then hedging them off and just simple things, like 1 or 2 strategies. Covered calls on small stocks that pay dividends, learning how to identify risk, learning how to communicate with his broker. Thinkorswim was way too complicated for him, so we went with a different one. And we just kept it simple, But and this is the thing, and I appreciate what you said, about me listening, because I take a lot of pride in that. I think everybody out there should. If you will step back and just listen to somebody else speak before you speak, you'll be a better person for it. It doesn't matter if you're supposed to be in charge or not. As a mentor, I'm supposed to be in charge all the time, but yet I have to shut my mouth more than I talk. Because teaching does not mean I'm just sitting there yapping for 8 hours a day. I have to let people experience the day. I have to let them experience the market. I have to let them communicate with me and build a business. It's a very interesting perspective. I had Noah, who's one of the coaches at TackleTrading.com with us, one of my team members. Noah told me one time, I don't even know how you get away with what you do. Because so many days, there are a lot of days, Steve, where I'll put somebody to work on a project, and they might be working for 30 minutes or an hour while I'm just sitting there trading, because I know the way that people really learn something is they have to absorb it. It has to sink in. Whether it's my 80-year-old student who just has to learn, one strategy or two strategy, or whether it's you where you have to learn your own rules and experience it and figure it out and learn how to day trade and hedge and deal with swing trading and different products. You take every situation as it is, and I'm so excited to get you, teaching some classes over at TackleTrading.com. I think we're going to do some live events where we bring our pro members in and let them kind of just watch you trade and watch you talk. I know you had some hesitation about the whole thing, but I can assure you most people would be pretty damned excited to be a part of that.
Oh, it sounds so exciting. It's really an honor. And, going back to one thing we started talking about at the beginning of the conversation, I really feel like everybody's system has to reflect their personality. And for me, it was, again, unfortunately getting sucked up in that real estate scam. And I felt like when I was younger, I took enough risk for my lifetime. That's enough for me. And so I naturally gravitate towards credit spreads and those kind of trades that have high probabilities of success. Mm-hmm. Even now, I still remember our first mentorship, Tim, where you were telling me, if you're doing well in a month, maybe you want to take a very small amount of your profits and just throw it out there as a speculative call or a speculative put. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't work out, who cares? It's a tiny amount. You're still profitable on the month. If it works out, then you make a profitable month, an awesome month.
Yeah.
But even now, it's still hard for me to do that because my mindset and my personality is very much geared towards where I just like having consistently hitting singles and doubles all day long, as opposed to having a speculative call. But that's just my personality. And there's plenty of people who can do that with no problem.
It's amazing. And not everybody's going to connect the way that you and I have. But while you're talking, I was just thinking, I wonder how many new ideas I've had since Steve was here that he didn't even get to take part in. Like you came out for mentoring and I showed you how to build a business and I gave you all the knowledge and expertise and guidance I could. But here I am 5 years later, more knowledge, more expertise, more, all of that. And you didn't get it. My training has even changed over the years. I think it's a testament to where you got to stay connected with people. Far too often in life, we form relationships, whether they're business or personal, and there's something valuable there, and then it slips away. And I think that's a tragedy. Well, you can't stay connected with everybody, but you've got to at least have the ability to go back and create that touch point. Yeah, I'll tell you. It's a very unique question because Steve is my Hall of Fame student. And actually, Steve, not to spoil the event, but I got to tell you, I had nominated a couple of people before that I thought were deserving, and they were just too shy to go through all the rigmarole that you have to do to actually get qualified. You know that experience.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of really successful students, but Steve was my Hall of Fame student. I taught him in, 10 and 11, Steve? 2010?
That's right.
Yeah, 10
That's
and 11.
Right.
That's 3 and 4 years ago. And, oh, geez, I got to tell you, Matt, over the years, there are several things I've learned. Number one is that not everybody loves spreadsheets. That might seem like the simplest thing in the world, but some people love them and some people hate them. One of the first jobs I have as an educator is to get in the brain and the mind and the perspective of the student, so I know how you learn, how you think, what your goals are, so I can help you develop a system and a business plan. So many people, let's call them bosses, and I might even call them middle management bosses, and I'm not going to name names, but there are a lot of people that don't have any idea what the hell we do. Oh. And, they might be in charge of this or that, and they might say, okay, you got a mentor and you got to get them these 10 ideas. And I'm like, are you serious? No, what I have to do is get to know a human being and help them achieve their goals, and I have enough confidence because I've been doing it long enough to just trust my own methods and my own system and trust my own approach to educating. And Steve, as you get into mentoring, if I could give you if there was only one bit of advice, is embrace each situation as unique, because it's not just about showing them a 7-step, plan to success. It really is about just working with somebody individually and learning, how that person ticks.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It's I can think if I just went with somebody who had just a road program that they taught every single student that came through their door, that probably wouldn't have worked for me back then. It not only the first mentorship, but the second one too. I don't know if you remember, Tim, but I called you up and I said, hey, I really want to learn how to hedge on a really deep level.
Oh, I remember.
And then also, as a secondary.
Do you remember
priority.
why? Do you remember why?
Yeah, I do. I think I called you around August of 2011.
Yep, the U.S. government was screwing up again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had a profitable year. I had only one losing month so far that year. And August was my second, and it wiped out all of my profits from the year and put me in the red. Yeah, it just crushed me.
It got killed. Yeah.
But I remember thinking to myself, so we did hedging, and then secondarily we did day trading. And I remember flying up to Utah and having my reservations and thinking, can we really talk about hedging and day trading for 3 full days? and we went up there and we did it, and that's when you catered the program based upon that. And you're exactly right, Tim. It's each person is different, and you've got to adjust based upon what
Steve,
how they want to learn.
I just realized I need to charge more for my mentoring. My time is clearly awesome.
Yes, it is.
Again, everyone learns differently, but when I go to the classes and I meet other traders, I hear over and over again, I'm really busy right now. I've got a lot of stuff on my plate, and when I have time, I'll go over it. They're talking about the class materials. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, maybe that person will work out. But also a big part of my mind is thinking, chances are probably not. It's going to be really difficult for them to achieve success with that kind of mentality. And rarely have I seen somebody who said, okay, all the craziness in my life is done, and now I have time, and then really, really focus and then come out on the other end and be successful. And the reason why is life is full of crazy things all the time. Every single month there's something crazy that happens in my life that I have to deal with. And so I'm never fully freed up. So I think the single most important thing, Matt, is to treat it like a business and go in with a certain level of tenacity and attack that material, absorb it, put in the time that you need to, and really, really learn it as much as you can. Talk to the traders that you respect and try to get their knowledge, reach out and talk to your broker, things like that. But there's that mentality.
I'll embrace all of that, but I'm going to add something to it. It doesn't have to be your only business. See, this is where people make a mistake, is they think that if they're going to start a trading business, they're going to need like 16 hours a day of study. They're going to have to quit their job and replace their income and all that shit. And they don't. You just have to make a decision that tomorrow you're going to wake up and do something positive with your time. And then the next day you're going to wake up and you're going to make a new trade. Because after time, after a month, 2 months, and 3 months, and 6 months, and a year, you've arrived. You've gotten something there, you know. And I'll tell you, I love what you said. I just think that I wanted to clarify one little thing there. Guys, it doesn't have to be all of your time. You just have to be willing to commit your time. Get off your lazy keister and get up and do something that's going to change your life. Whether it's trading or getting in better shape or, you know, forming better relationships, working on yourself, whatever it is. You know, I listen to people make excuses all the time, like, oh, you know, I got a buddy, Steve, and I keep trying to get him to go into business and do something for himself. And for the longest time, he's an electrician, and he's really good at it, but he doesn't like to work more than his shift. You know, he'll go to work. When his shift's done, he'll go home. He'll watch Jeopardy. He'll make dinner, and then he chills and goes to bed. And that's his life, and he likes it. So for the longest time, I keep talking to him. Let's start an electrician's business, because this is my best friend from college that I had. Matt's, you know, most of the time my best friend in the world. He was the best man at 2 of my weddings. Hopefully those are the only 2. But
I would hope so. Yes.
I hope so. I think we're doing all right.
I'm going to decline the next time.
If I go for a third, you're out.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm not even showing up.
Yeah, I'm not going for a third. We're happily married. We're going to stay that way. But the thing with my friend is, Steve, in the last month, I finally turned a corner with him, and I saw something when I presented an idea to him that I have not seen in years and years and years and years. And you know what he did today? He called me. And you know what he did yesterday? He called me, and we talked about our business plan, and we're going to start a business together. You know, these are the kind of things I'm passionate about. It's not just the money. If I can affect the people in my life or the people that want to be in my life in a positive way, that means way more than to me than just making money. I got to tell you that. You know, I love money. Stack it up. Count that cash. I have no problem with money. I like it, and I want to do things that are positive. But if you're going to change it, you use the word mindset. And I think that's so powerful and so important that if you're going to change your life, you have to change your mindset. Steve, you weren't perfect at this when you started. It took time. But you decided that you're going to go for it, and you stuck to it. That's more important than you might know, you know. Holy cow. You guys are listening to the Trading Justice podcast here with Steve Huang, mentor student of mine, now a colleague of mine, friend of mine, going to be an instructor with Tackle Trading at some point if we can get that thing worked out. I have to get it all, you know, figured out, but at some point I think you'll be working with the community over there.
Oh, absolutely.
And just generally a good guy. The only fault that both you and I have is that we're Chicago Bears fans, Steve.
I remember going into the the first 3-day class. It was called Stock Success. And there was a gentleman sitting right next to me, and the instructor was teaching us all sorts of things, and I didn't know whether to believe it or not. And I asked him, you know, what do you think about this? And it turns out that he actually took the classes and about a year ago, and he was actually trading live. And he said that, yeah, it works. I average about $500 a month. And I remember hearing that and thinking it might as well have been $1 million a month, because 500 sounded like a lot of money to me. And I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking, well, if I can just average $500 a month, what a difference that would make in our lives. And I look back now, you know, $500 a month, you know, the goal is very different nowadays. It's not 500, it's higher than that. But look at last year, the ROI last year was 52%. This year, you know, I thought I was going to buy a home So I traded very lightly into the end of July, and it picked up in August, and I'm at 37.5% already this year. And the reality is you're capable of a lot more than you think. And you just got to have somebody who believes in you, somebody who will support you and help you and show you the ropes along the way. That's really the main point that I'd like to communicate. It's this trading thing has done so much for our lives, Tim. You know, my wife, me, our my stepdaughter, and now our new son. It's just, you know, I remember standing up at the Hall of Fame, the ceremony, talking to the CEO of Rich Dad, and I kind of choked up a little bit at the end, just thinking about how much this has changed our lives. And this is, you know, it doesn't have to be trading. It could be anything. You know, my next goal in my life is to lose weight, you know, and get in better shape.
I was going to tell you that should be your number one goal, just as your friend.
Yeah, it should be. It needs to be. It needs to be.
Wow.
Wow. I saw the way you hit the buffets in Las Vegas.
Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of nuts. That was nuts. But, you know, you can do so much. And it's, at the end of the day, all you have to do is, you're never going to get there if you don't try. So start trying. Whatever it is, try, do your best, and you'll be amazed with what you can do.
Well, I'll tell you, a tremendous message. You've got me really thinking here. And I remember that moment at the Hall of Fame ceremony when you were up there and you choked up. And it made me choke up a little bit. And then when you finally, you caught your breath, and it was a touching moment, and you came out of it. And after it, I just screamed. I said, yeah, you know, as loud as I could, and I was clapping, and everybody was staring at me, and then they started clapping. It was tremendous. It was awesome. And, you know, the reason it is, Steve, is, and sometimes you're too close to a situation to really appreciate how big it can be to other people. Your story, your message, your history, it's empowering. But it also comes with responsibility too, because now you can't screw up. Okay? You got to keep trading successfully, and you got to be a role model, because I really think you can be. And I'm just joking with you there. I don't think there's any risk of that. But just continue to be a success, you know. Continue to share that message too, whether you're getting paid for it or not, teaching a class or being a mentor. I get paid sometimes. It doesn't matter. I still try to share the same message to people I ride the train with. You know, if somebody wants to listen, and I'm not just, you know, in everybody's face all the time, but if I feel like there's a moment where I can actually help somebody, I'm always talking to them. And I think you should embrace that mindset as well, because you've got something powerful, my friend. You really do. You've got something powerful there, because the mindset thing, how many people do you know that went to law school or graduate school, they thought they had it all figured out, but they really didn't? You know, and, you know, think about the change you made from there to where you are now, and the importance of your experiences and your mindset, and your every day you wake up and you got to try to do something to improve your knowledge. You got to do something to improve your stature, to improve your account, to make more money, to build a new business. It's really awesome to think about. I love the whole journey. I love the process, you know. To me, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. I know that's a cliche thing to say, but if I just had $500 million, that would be great. But, you know, I want to experience getting there as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tim. That means a lot to me. It's a wonderful thing.
Oh, well, I don't think we're going to do better than that, Matt. You guys have been listening to the Trading Justice podcast with my brother Matt, Steve Huang, three of the Tackle Trading crew here. You can check us out at tackletrading.com. You can download the podcast at iTunes. If you like it, review it. Give us 5 stars, guys. We love that. Go out there and just spread the word. If anybody has any requests for content or subjects or conversations for future podcasts, go on to tackletrading.com, go into the club section. Hey, Tim, we'd love to learn more about this. Speaking of that, in a future podcast, Steve, one thing I would love to do is talk about your theta fade strategy. I think we could probably spend a whole hour on that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd be happy to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll walk you guys through exactly what I do on Fridays.
You've been listening to the Trading Justice podcast. If you've enjoyed yourself and think that the conversations and topics we've covered are important, help spread the word. Give us your feedback. 5 stars on iTunes, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. The Trading Justice podcast is proudly sponsored by TackleTrading.com. Get off the sidelines and get in the game.